all the disciplines and deans and students that you have to deal with. So any way that we can provide help, we wanted to do that. So Intern was born in that respect, to provide that complimentary service where we could help you connect with more businesses and help students have more opportunities. So with that being said, we're excited today. This is one part of really starting to educate the public and our businesses of what Intern is and how everyone can work together. And with that, I would like to bring up who is just an unbelievable partner for Connect. More importantly, taking Intern on to really be where she sees an opportunity to be impactful with Connect. So at this time, I'd like to bring up Sue Riley, the Director of Family Business Alliance at Wilkes University.
Director for the Family Business Alliance, which is a membership organization for family businesses that has been around for 20 years. I think it's the best kept secret. And we provide educational programming and services to promote family businesses throughout northeastern Pennsylvania. But one of the needs, I think, with all businesses, and especially small family businesses, is how to have an internship. This provides an opportunity maybe for prospective employees for this family business, but also they want them to provide a good experience for the students. So this is a great opportunity to help to promote this program and work with the Chamber, which is a great partnership. So I'm thrilled to be here. And it's my great opportunity to introduce this panel that has agreed so very nicely to participate today. We have on my left Bernadette Rushner, who is the director of the Insulaco Center for Career Development at Misericordia University. She oversees Guaranteed Placement Program and conducts career-related workshops along with individual counseling sessions to help students develop the professional skills needed for successful career outcomes. Thank you, Bernadette, for being here. And next to Bernadette, we have Kelly Lettieri from King's College. She's been at King's College since 2007. Her primary responsibilities include career coaching students and assisting them through the process of securing and completing their internships. She is the Assistant Director for Internships at King's College. Thank you, Kelly, for being here. And next to Kelly, we have a student from Wilkes University, who I have the pleasure of meeting through the Alan P. Kirby Center for Enterprise and Entrepreneurship, Jeremy Tomaine. He is a senior finance and economics major at Wilkes, and he has had a few internship experiences with Ameriprise Financial, Chancellor Financial, and also Berkshire Hathaway Guard Insurance. So thank you for being here, Jeremy. And next to Jeremy, we have Sharon Castano, also from Wilkes University. She is the Director for Internships and Parent Programs and First-Year Foundations and Personal and Professional Development Instructor at Wilkes University. She is a Students Affairs professional at Wilkes University for over 13 years of experience in higher education. So thank you for joining us, Sharon. Nice to have you here. And next to Sharon is Susan Sprague from Luzerne County Community College. She is the Vice President of Applied Technologies and Workforce Development. She provides assistance to those in emerging, incumbent, and transitional workforce, and to the businesses that employ these individuals. We're thrilled to have you here, Susan. Thank you very much. And next to Susan, we have Carl Witkowski, who is the Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President at Berkshire Guard Insurance Company. And Guard is a sponsor for today's event. Thank you very much. And the intern program. Thank you very much for your help with this. And you have been, you're in charge of all operating units, including claims processing, small, intermediate business unit underwriting, and customer service and support functions. So again, thank you for all your support for the Chamber and this program. Carl, thank you.
Glad to be here.
Okay. And then next to Carl, we have Nicole Dowling from Penn State University. She is the Eastern Region Employer Engagement and Career Specialist. And what's really interesting, Nicole is responsible for employer engagement efforts for 12 of the 20 Commonwealth campuses. And just chatting with her, they just did an internship fair last Thursday, where they had 5 schools participate. Yes. 6. And also then, and Sharon Castano had an internship fair last Thursday at Wilkes University. So this is a very integral part of the schools and also so important to the businesses in our area for the students and their future employment. And it's also my opportunity then to introduce our moderator for today, who is Dr. Rodney Ridley, who is the Executive Director for the Alan P. Kirby Center for Free Enterprise and Entrepreneurship. Rodney, I'd love to have you get started there. Thank you very much.
All right. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
This is I'm loud to start with. Wanted to do something very quickly this morning, give you a little orientation about how today's session is going to go. I actually had the panel get together and talk to them a little bit beforehand so that we can have a successful event this morning. The way this is going to go, we have, obviously, to try to talk about internships, could be, you could be here all day talking about internships, but we wanted to highlight a few things this morning as it relates to hosting and hosting a good internship. And we have 3 segments we're going to do this morning, 3 about 20-minute segments. So we'll talk about the 3 segments we're going to look at is, 1, how do you define an internship, job description, get students interested in that. Second is looking at the difference between paid and unpaid internships, as well as doing internships for credit and not for credit, how those things affect employers and students. And then finally, we want to just look at practical issues of hosting an effective internship, how to get the most out of your intern as a company. Today's segment is really aimed at employers, not necessarily at students, but this segment is really aimed at talking to employers, both large employers and small employers, in terms of size of your company, how to effectively host an internship. So the panel has already been preset to answer some questions along that line and to give you some best practices from their perspective, because each of them has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to internships. So we're going to ask them to share some of their knowledge. So the way this will work is we'll have the panel give a few minutes on each topic from their perspective on the various topics. And then we want to hear from you as people in the audience, what questions you might have related to that. So we'll do about 10 or 15 minutes of the panel, and then we'll throw it to you to have you 5 minutes on each segment with questions and answers. So hopefully that's all clear. We really want this to be interactive, so speak up. So with that, I'm going to throw it out to the panel. We had some questions, and I think the first question that we looked at was talking about the qualifications of hosting an intern and really also writing a job description. How do you get students interested in coming to your facility? How do you get students interested in coming to be a part of your company? And we'll just throw it out there to the panel, and then these folks aren't shy, so.
Well,
So,
go ahead.
No, please.
One of the things that we always suggest to the, can you hear me?
Yeah,
One of the things that,
let me just remind everybody, we are videotaping this as live stream, and in order for everybody on the live stream to hear, they're going to have to project themselves because the mic is there. So.
Okay, thank you. One of the things we always suggest to employers is to write a job description. So just as you would if you were hiring a full-time or a part-time employee, have a job description written, and that should include things like what are the skill sets you're looking for, what are the hours you're expecting the student to work, contact information, the dates of the internship, so when you would like it to begin and end, as well as some information on the company and the company website.
So I was going to remark, at least the way we approach it is that the job description for our interns is really the job description for our employees. It's just the degree of proficiency and maybe productivity that would change, but when we offer an internship, and we have dozens of interns each year, actually during our summer months we probably have 30, 35 interns on board. And so the intention is that they understand what the work environment is. You know, one of the things we try to put out there is that the experience is important not only for the intern but also for the company as well. It's one of those things that the way we approach it is that if it's going to be valuable, we believe there needs to be something in it for both the intern and the company. And the benefits to the company are numerous. You know, students keep us fresh. They challenge us because they have, you know, great ideas and ask questions like, why are you doing it this way, or why is that important? So the difference, though, is that rather than managing an intern like an employee, they need to be managed like an intern, to understand that they're there not just to be productive, to be part of the workforce, to add value to our organization, but they also have some additional goals that are important to them in terms of what the learning objectives are, that are a combination of both academic as well as personal. Because one of the things that we believe an intern needs to get out of the program is personal development and helping them be in a better position to make sure that they're in the right career track and the kind of company and culture that they want to work within.
Can somebody expound on that? Because we had a conversation a little bit when we were discussing this a little bit earlier and talking about the difference between co-ops and internships as well as the academic goals of the student versus the economic goals of the company. Because the students, when they take internship, actually have academic goals which the company needs to be aware of as they bring these students in. So somebody address the academic goals.
I was just going to say really quickly, I think the level of preparation you put into the job description and everything that Carl talked about will directly affect the success of that internship. You don't want to say we're going to have interns and then not really do all the groundwork to know what exact duties that student will do when they're there. You want to make sure that their days are filled with academic information that they're going to pull from their own coursework so that they can, you know, create real-world experiences for themselves. But it's super important that there is someone there to direct them and show them every day. You don't want to go into an internship thinking this is another body that we can get work done and have it more of an economical sort of benefit for the company. You really want to think about how will this internship not only benefit our organization, but will benefit the student as well. So having all those things laid out ahead of time before the internship starts with the job description that Bernie mentioned, and of course all the things that Carl mentioned as well. It's just a really critical part of planning an internship.
And if I can back that up and add to that a little bit, I think when you are an organization that maybe never had an intern, where do you start with the internship process besides even before the job description? It might be an internal audit. So you may want to sit with the groups, the directors, everyone who would have a buy-in and ask them, what projects are sitting on the side of your desk that you would love to get to that we can implement an intern into that process. So an internal audit, I think, would be probably would precede the job description, and then move forward with each person putting forth the job description. And I do believe GARD does that. They request from their directors, the people that are running the projects, an internal audit to see if anyone is in need of an intern.
Yeah, towards that end, it's important, and you know, obviously this is geared towards all size employers, but particularly those, you know, smaller family-owned company. The culture needs to be prepared for an intern. You'd be surprised, some employees, maybe some newer employees, might feel threatened because a lot of interns are very talented, and they come in, and you know, sometimes the interns are, you know, quickly kind of surpassing their coworkers in terms of proficiency and ideas, etc. So the environment in which the intern is being introduced needs to be prepared. So it's not just the supervisor, but the supervisor. We meet with our supervisors and managers. We have them request interns. We have them identify what the interns are going to be doing to make sure that it's a valuable experience, but also one that's harmonious to the needs of the organization. Because again, the best internship is one where both benefit. And that's something that keeps students and the schools coming back, but also will keep your workforce and your supervisors and managers wanting interns in the future. So very important to, you know, align those goals.
So as you guys are discussing this, one of the things we talked about also was when you're looking at a job description, so when you're trying to attract a student to come to you, one of the things that we talked about having was realistic expectations. So looking at how much time a student is expected to be there, the skill sets that may or may not be needed as you're writing a job description. Can somebody speak to that as you're writing this? You know, location is a big deal, where they're going to be located, those sorts of things.
So I can hit on that. First, each of the schools have a little bit of a different requirement for how many hours, a basic internship may be. So on average, it's usually like a 3-credit experience, which we're going to talk about, is 10 to 15 hours with a full course schedule. So if a student's taking, 4 or 5 courses, typically they would be able to commit 10 to 15 hours a week because, that would be worked around their schedule. At some institutions, a co-op is defined at 25 to 30 or even 25 to full-time. Some of us don't use the term co-op, but essentially it's an intern working full-time. So typical semester-wise, fall or spring is when you would get maybe 10 to 15 hours with a student who's doing a full load. And then during the summer, you would get somebody probably more on the 25 to 40 range of hours. But that can also vary depending on the projects and depending on the student's availability. But being realistic with time frame and location, if a student has to travel from Wilkes-Barre to Scranton, they may need to account for a little bit more time, hours per week as well. But when they're actually at your site, having a set location for them to do their work and to be productive is important. Having a set workspace with a computer or at least a place for a computer, having a phone if needed. If you have expectations of requirements you want them to complete, having the resources there for them to do it is also extremely helpful.
To add on to the academic piece that Kelly's referring to when we're talking about number of hours that apply towards credits, it also the work that they're doing as well. Students will speak to me sometimes and say, I'm working 20 hours, I can get 6 credits. Not necessarily. The type of job that they're doing and the work that they're actually completing within that also counts towards those credits. So if this is a frequent answering of phones type internship and doing projects on the side, this won't be a 6-credit internship. So that's going to affect a lot of what we're talking about here today. In addition to that, when the students do it for credit and they're doing it for academic credit, it is a grade that goes towards their overall GPA. So we ask that our employers do an internship and speak to the student about whether or not they're getting credit. We like to hold them accountable, and we like to say, I know you're going to come whether you're doing it for credit or not, but if it is an unpaid internship, they get so busy through the semester, their time tends to trail off. So we like to make it an academic experience if at all possible. And we'll work with you to do that if you need help to do that. But don't be intimidated by when my student brings you learning objectives. What is that? Your job description. So translate all of their work that they have to do to your position and your type of work that you want them to do. That's what my learning objectives are, is basically your job description. It's kind of what your goals are too. So I try to put the employer's mind at ease that they're not they're not going to get into the academia world. It's a lot of paperwork that we kind of require, just showing them how are they getting their grade, per se.
If I could add on to that just a little bit, and this will vary based on the institution and based on the faculty member overseeing the internship, but the student will often have academic requirements on the back end or throughout the internship. So they may be required to write reflection papers or a journal about their experience. And then that is a way for them to be able to discuss with their faculty member how they're achieving those learning objectives that were set forth at the beginning of the experience. And it's also a time for them to do a little assessment to say, am I really getting out of this what I'm hoping to? And if they're not, then they can come back to the employer and have some discussions around that and how can they adjust so that they are meeting those learning objectives. You may also be asked to fill out an evaluation on the student I know Ms. Recordia does that at a midterm and a final evaluation so that we can get some direct feedback from you as how the student was performing in the internship.
If I could just follow up on that point, particularly in those structured internships, whether they be full-time or part-time or for credit or non-credit, it's important that the student not be surprised. So you don't want to hand in an evaluation midterm or end of term and not have sat down with the student, or reach midterm and not have ongoing conversations with the student. So just like an employee that you would supervise, you never want to surprise an employee at time of their annual or interim review. A student never wants to be surprised. And if there's issues, you know, the faculty or the liaisons are there to assist and to work it out. So the other thing that, you know, we've experienced, and thank goodness we've had rarely have we had any questionable experiences. 99% have been, you know, positive. But when there is an issue, the school is there to work with you and to work with the students. And sometimes it doesn't work out. You know, again, the whole aspect, or one of the aspects of the internship, is to give that employee an opportunity to test out your culture and the kind of company that you are, and the kind of profession or skills that they think that they want to apply to at least the next phase of their career, or the beginning phase of their career. So sometimes things don't match, and that's okay. The earlier you identify that and either get it on track or say, okay, let's just kind of do a mulligan here and look for another internship, and we need to look for another intern. That's okay. Don't let it linger towards the end, just like you don't want to let things linger with an employee, surprise them, and have a negative experience.
So one of the things, we're going to be talking a little bit here in the next segment about the difference between credit and non-credit and paid and unpaid. So we'll get a little bit more into that and give you some more detail about that. But I want to sort of wrap this segment up. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on, especially for employers, because I know when I was seeking interns, and when I was running companies in the industry, one of the things that surprised me the most was, when do you post for an intern? Because it's not, you know,
early and often.
Yeah, exactly. It's not exactly what you would think in order to get businesses run on a 24-hour cycles, and academia runs on semesters, and they don't necessarily line up. So give us a sense of when you should be posting this thing and what the expectation is. So if I want somebody in April, when should I be getting them? Or when's the best time to get students, and how's that all run, academic aligning with business?
I can take that from the Penn State kind of point of view. It differs depending on the companies and the size of the company. So at UPark, our larger companies like Volvo or P&G, they may be posting a year out for their interns. So they may be posting in September for the following summer's internships. But what we see on the campuses, our small to mid-sized companies, they will be posting, sometimes they will post as early as November this year for next summer's interns. But majority of the times they will start posting in January, and then depending on the company and the industry, they may even post right into April. Past April, you're going to have a harder time finding the qualified candidates that you're looking for, because most of them have already committed to an internship, say, over the summertime. So for summertime internships, that would be my guideline. I would probably want to get it out in early January, because that's when we sort of tell students start looking and start trying to make that commitment for the summer. I don't know what my colleagues.
At the smaller institution, I mean, at least at King's, the semester before is always best, because the earlier you can plan, the easier it's going to be to find qualified applicants. You know, right up until, if you're looking for someone to start in January and you're posting a position in January, you're getting the kids that might be scrambling, or, you know, who have just decided, oh, I think I want to have an experience. But if you can project maybe like, you know, September, October, it helps, because students, especially, and we're going to talk about registering for credit and what the difference between academic credit and non-credit is. If it's something that they're looking for and trying to plan for, advisement and registration happens the end of October, beginning of November. So if you can project in October what your need is for the spring, that would be great. And in the spring, I would say around March is an ideal time, February, March.
And if I could just say one other thing, if you're in an organization and you're considering hosting an intern for the first time, we encourage you to outreach to our departments so that we know about the opportunity and that we can make sure our students are aware of the opportunity as well. Some of the more Guard, we know that he's right, they post a lot of internships. We know we can always look on their site and find what opportunities are available, which is wonderful. But if we don't know that you're interested in an intern, we may not be able to get that information to the student. So please feel free to contact any of our departments.
So we're at the point for questions and answers sort of segment. So we're going to be throwing it out to you now. Do you have what questions you might have for the distinguished panel here as it relates to seeking an intern? How do you post? How do you get an intern to come to your company? So throw out to you for questions.
Question when looking at these, defining the scope of what an intern is going to do. It sounds like a lot is saying you have a project kind of on the back burner ready to go. How much of that versus, that's defined so as here's the outcome I'd like, I don't have time to it, versus something that might be a little bit more open-ended. So I'm having problems in my customer service response time. There are a couple of things I'd like an intern to look at and come up with an approach, as opposed to say, please implement an IVR, an automated system, and just get that going. We haven't had time. So it's one of those things, being more creative and possibly using the skills versus, lack of a better word, hired hand to just get a project done.
I think also that depends on how much time the supervisor would want to work with the student. So having them, a few of my students have done research like that. Mm-hmm. I believe they were closely supervised at that point because we don't want them to go off the beaten path. But I think if you can put the time into that, I think that is a good project. So you would name your goal and then you would talk about the methods that student's going to use to work through that goal. And as long as the supervisor is going to put in some time, maybe once a week, that you meet and see what the student has gathered to keep them on track would be a good idea. So the open-ended projects are good as well. It's a lot of those projects that you'd love to do if you can clone yourself, right? And then that would be something that the student can work on alongside of you, not necessarily physically, but alongside of your assistants. So that would be helpful. That you'd have more supervisory interaction, I believe, in that case.
And we also brought up a point when we had our discussion earlier about this exact topic as it relates to how much work should you be giving an intern. And I know that one of the things we brought up was always have more projects available for that student than they might be able to complete in the time frame that you're looking at. So you have to have a realistic time frame and have multiple projects for them, because the last thing you want them to do is to have one project. And as we know, most projects will have lulls. So when there's lulls, you get bored. So if you have multiple projects that are independent from one another, the student will have much more of a positive experience and get more done. But you have to gauge that.
I think the more specific you can be in posting, for example, on the chamber internships site, you'd be more successful in attracting those kind of students that are a little bit more entrepreneurial, a little bit more research oriented, and get excited rather than, one of the things that we're looking at, and some feedback that we got from students in a program here that I participated in a few weeks ago, is that their recommendation to Guard was if our internship advertisements were a little bit more specific in identifying those kinds of opportunities, they thought we'd be even more successful in attracting interns. So, those kinds of things I think would, really light up students who, were in that track or wanted that kind of more independent research orientation.
Okay, so I'm getting the signal here that we need to move on to our next segment. And if you still have more questions about this, we will have more time at the end. So if you have a question that relates to this, write it down and we'll pick it up at the end. But we want to move on to our next segment. To respect everybody's time to get through as much material as possible. Next up is the credit versus non-credit discussion and paid versus unpaid discussion, which are two different things, but Let's start with credit versus non-credit. You know, there's a lot of misunderstanding about credit and who's responsible for what when it comes to credit, who can determine who gets credit and those sorts of factors. Can somebody start us off with, you know, just the do's and don'ts or who's responsible in the credit versus non-credit discussion, especially as it relates to the employer?
Let me take a stab at that one. So all of us offer both credit and non-credit, paid, non-paid type internship or work-based learning experiences. And if it's for credit, usually the post-secondary institution is driving that discussion. And it's something I think you said, Sharon, a few minutes ago about the fact that there's certain, if there's certain credit requirements, then there are certain outcomes we need to see. So it would be a joint discussion, of course, but really the institution just briefly would drive that discussion. When it's a more open kind of situation where credit is not attached to it, then I think it truly is a equalizing discussion of what would be valuable to both the employer and to the student. I just want to introduce we won't be talking about apprenticeship opportunities, but I think of that kind of in the same vein of work-based learning. We typically think of that more in a skilled trades area or something like that, but there are a lot of opportunities that are opening up for more non-traditional sectors to utilize apprenticeships, not registered apprenticeships necessarily, which involve a lot of paperwork and state funding, although those are available too, and the state is encouraging that. But just thinking about that earn while you learn, it's a very old concept that always gets renewed every so many generations, right? So it's a hot topic now, one we won't have time to talk about this morning, but it's also something that kind of lends itself to this discussion.
One of the things we wanted to also, make sure that was very clear, and maybe somebody can speak to this, is the topic of paid versus unpaid, and attracting students and the type of work you get done at paid versus unpaid. And maybe we'll look at the student to talk about this one. Give us your thoughts about paid versus unpaid internships, especially from a student perspective.
Okay, so I've had 4 internships now, both paid and unpaid. And both for credit and not for credit. At my non-paid internships, it was a little bit more unstructured and a little bit more unprofessional, I would say. They didn't really know what expectations they had for an internship. They didn't really have any projects. And I kind of got in there and I had to figure out for myself where I could use my skills to help their corporation to help expand their outreach and get clients in the door. And then at my paid internships, it seemed like they were a little bit more structured. I felt like I was more part of the team, like an actual employee of the company, and I was able to make more of a contribution, I feel like. I think the work that I did there was at a higher level, so the company received, they benefited from my skills, and then I also benefited having a positive experience, getting an inside knowledge of the company and seeing how all that comes together.
There's another big myth out there that often comes up when we talk about credit versus non-credit. I hear a lot of employers say, we're going to offer this internship, instead of paying you, we're going to offer it for credit. Can they do that? Somebody speak to us about the employer's role in determining credit versus non-credit and that sort of thing.
Unfortunately, it's going back to the original discussion, it's the academic institution that really can determine if the job description, if the internship itself is worth the academic credit, because the institution is the one that's registering it. The institution is the one that's actually giving the grade for the experience. I get a lot of times students say, well, my employer said they're going to give me this grade. Well, the employer really doesn't give the grade, because just to take a step back for a second, the internship is defined as, an experiential opportunity between the school, the site, and the student. The site provides feedback through an evaluation process. We all do it a little different, but there's usually a midterm and a final process that gets factored into the grade. There's usually weekly reflection or weekly journals and check-ins with the faculty members, so that the faculty member isn't just like, okay, go fly, spread your wings. There's an actual component of making sure they're checking in, making sure that the student is accomplishing the goals that they are. And if they're not, having a discussion and talking with the employer and saying, you know, could we look at redesigning some of these learning objectives? The student's kind of going in a different direction, so can we see about, you know, making it work for them? And then, you know, the last part is usually a final project on the student's end, where it may be a paper of their experience. It may be a presentation where they come and they actually do a presentation to the employer and to the faculty members. So there's lots of different components that go into it. But it's ultimately, you know, the job description is factored in, and then our vetting of that and recommending, okay, yes, this would meet the requirements of receiving academic credit. The other thing between paid and unpaid, the Fair Labor Standard Act exists. There's lots of information, I think, on the table when you come in, and that's a good method to use to determine, okay, if I have this experience, it's great, I can't afford to pay, you know, does it fit this realm? And then from the institution's perspective, we would then want the student to receive academic credit because liability-wise, it helps protect the student. And there's lots of different information that exists about that.
Yeah, I'll add to that. The whole paid, unpaid thing can be a lot of gray area. In January, the Department of Labor sort of loosened up the requirements for what is considered, you know, what should be considered paid versus unpaid. But in essence, the student would need to be able to prove that the benefit for an unpaid internship, and if they had legal ramification for the intern, was if it was unpaid, the benefit was on the employer. The employer wants to make sure that if they're offering an unpaid internship, that the benefit of the intern experience is on the student. So you can read the, you know, the 8 sort of clarifications as to what makes an unpaid or paid, but really that's in essence where it lies. The student has to receive the benefit of the internship in order for the organization to sort of be not liable for any repercussions of, you know, having a student come in, do work for them, whether it be maybe clerical, you know, answering phones, doing things that they should really hire somebody to do. That would not be the role of an intern. They have to show that the benefit is for the student. So that's what you want to think about when you think about paid versus unpaid. The other caveat to that is it will determine, your candidate pool will determine on the industry. If you are thinking about offering an unpaid internship, say in engineering, that may be more difficult to do because most internships in that field will be paid, and it's to the point where they will be competitively paid. So a student may actually opt out of an internship or, you know, decline an internship if, you know, the company's offering 17, but another company's offering, you know, $20 an hour for that same internship. Now, health services, they're going to be a whole different, you know, ball game. You're going to see most of those internships may be unpaid, but they're really going to have to prove that the benefit for that intern is with the student.
So I want to get to one question I know that's on the mind of most employers, and that is, what should I be expecting in the role of paying an intern as it relates to majors too, because I know majors has a big factor in being paid or unpaid. What should I be expecting to pay? And also speak to a little bit about, I know education has certain requirements for their internships, which are teaching experiences, and nursing has certain expectations for their internships or co-op. Process is a part of that program. And I know engineering, because I was director of engineering, I know engineering now, you can get up to $25 an hour in an internship. So can you guys speak to what an employer who's sitting in the audience who might want to be bringing in an intern, a marketing intern, or what is a good competitive wage right now versus majors and the rest of them?
So as you said, Rodney, it does. It depends a lot on the student's major, so to speak, or the degree they're seeking. The engineering, Rodney knows, I'm saying between $17 and $25 an hour our students are being paid. And 100% of my engineering interns are paid. I have not had one in years say to me, I remember the one person who did an unpaid engineering internship, and it was engineering, and the tower went down that year. Luckily for him, not for us, but it was something that he was actually desiring to learn, and he got the opportunity to learn that. So he said it was very worth it. Computer science, for example, same range, 17 to 25 an hour for my computer science majors. None of the computer science internships are unpaid. The marketing, the business, the standard across the board, I would say 8 to 12, and I'll ask my counterparts to agree or disagree with me, but in this area, $8 to $12 an hour. If they're going to go home, that's a different story. Where are they living? Are they living in Manhattan? Are they doing internships there? The accounting internships, I would say also roughly between $17 and $25 an hour if you're going to work in Manhattan. Another company that hires a year in advance. So these are all the variances that you're going to maybe compete with. You're also competing with what time of year you're taking a student. If that's in the summer, those students will want more of a paid internship opportunity because if you think back to when we were students, I used summer to gather my whole bank account together so I didn't have to work that much in semester. So take yourself back to maybe take the student side of this. What do you have to pay for? What are you looking towards? And our population at Wilkes is 50% first generation. So we have to consider that when I'm talking to employers about paying our students at what time of year and so forth.
Just from an employer's perspective, in terms of the internships we offer are pretty much all of those, computer science,
Yep.
some communications engineering, et cetera, business majors, accounting, as well as internships here in Wilkes-Barre, and we have field offices around the country, and one is in Manhattan. So, you know, a lot of actuarial internships we provide out of our Manhattan office, and those numbers ring true in terms of what we see to be competitive. And just one point before we leave the subject, from an employer perspective, the bus on particularly 4-credit internships is driven by the academic institution. And not that that's wrong or right, you know, it is what it is, but I think there's lots of employers, and you know, speaking for GUARD and, you know, being an insurance carrier, we're a microcosm of the economy. So we have you know, our own IT, computer science engineers, developers, networking engineers, communication engineers, investment. You know, we have you know, nearly $2 billion in investments right now that we need to manage in consultation and coordination with Omaha. We have graphic arts, a communications department, a managed care company, so we have nursing, so on and on and on. It would be great if the schools can figure out a way to engage with employers, because we would love to set up paid internships in a variety of areas for credit in the schools that can be part, and it would be a win for the organization, for the students, and for the employers. So it would be nice if there was some kind of conduit to be able to sit and say, so here's the experience we have, the professions that we have, what we're willing to do, how do you wrap your courses around our business? Right. And then that also becomes kind of a stream. We've had a lot of success in hiring our interns to move on to full-time positions once they graduate.
So we're going to, I'll get an assignment. We're now question and answer. I know Bernadette did.
Yeah, I just wanted to, you touched on the piece about teaching or healthcare. So just if I could make a note, if you're in an organization that would be in a healthcare or looking for a teacher education, those are typically handled a little bit differently, and that the school will establish an affiliation agreement with the organization prior to sending a student there. So a little bit different than an internship. The school will actually set up, because of liability and that type of thing, and the confidentiality of the types of things that they're doing in patient care. There's usually quite a formal agreement that's set up in advance before students go to that site.
So we're at the point now where we want to reach out to you again to get your questions as it relates to credit, non-credit, paid versus unpaid internships. The questions that the audience might have for
Are there some where you get a combination of paid and credit at the same time, or?
Those are the best.
Do it.
It's motivating for the student. There are some academic programs that require students to complete internships to complete their academic plan to be able to graduate. And so, like, computer science is one, you know, just political science is one at King's, professional writing. And so I think if you have a student who has to complete those requirements but can be compensated, it just, you know, it's the best of all worlds. And I think you see the quality of student, you see the quality of their contribution be beneficial.
And one thing that we haven't really talked about, during the summertime, if a student's going to be taking, or they're going to be applying and working at an internship for credit, that money has to come out of the student's own pocket. So despite paying tuition for 2 semesters for the fall and the spring, the summer is a different academic period. So all the credits earned have to be billed and paid for by the student. So it might be challenging for a student to work at a non-paid internship for credit over the summer as opposed to a paid internship or for credit and a wage.
That's very important. Jeremy brings up, I don't know if you guys caught that, but in the summer, so during the fall and the spring, credit for an internship is in the pay, it is a part of your tuition that you're already paying. So you're not coming out of pocket to get credit for an internship. But during the summer, you actually have to pay out of pocket if you're going to do it for credit to get the additional credit. So if you're working an internship and you're not getting paid over the summer, it's actually costing you money to do that internship as a student. So that's a big driver for why students will not take an unpaid internship, especially during the summer, because it's costing them.
I know at Penn State we encourage our employers to offer paid internships. For that reason, economically, our students are different than they were 20 years ago. Most of them have to work some type of part-time job. So for them to stop working their part-time job and receiving that income and take an internship that's unpaid, it makes it sometimes impossible for them to do that. So we do encourage employers to offer paid internships.
Other questions?
Yeah, I was also wondering too, relative to the employer, how you treat the intern in terms of, I mean, from a, I don't know, a liability perspective. I mean, do you do indemnification with them, and then also, you know, in regard to if you're doing them full time, you're hitting the over 30 hours threshold. Does that treat that intern as an employee?
Yeah, again, part of our philosophy is that we want that intern to understand what it's like to be in our workforce, in our culture. So we hold them to the same standards, and we treat them like an employee. So if they work over 40 hours, you know, they're getting time and a half. If they're not being responsible in terms of showing up on time, they're having a conversation with their supervisor. So while we understand their specific learning objectives and a responsibility to the institution and the student if it's a for-credit internship, we hold them to the same standards as any other employee, and therefore they're subject to the same indemnification, liability protection, and exposure.
Other questions? All right, so at this point, I'm getting told the time's up for this particular segment. So we're going to move on to our last segment, which is really best practices at hosting an intern at your company, and sort of nuggets of wisdom that you might be able to walk away with to make sure that the internship is effective for both you and for the student as a company. So as it relates to that, you know, what are your sort of thoughts, or if you could share best practices about what's best to do to when you're bringing in an internship? I know we talked about making sure projects were ready, that they came in, you know, having a place for students to sit and feel a part of the company. What are some of the best practices that, especially as it relates to small employers, bringing in interns and having them be effective?
If I can bookend that conversation, I'm going to say an orientation and an exit interview. Yeah. So I can say, when the student comes in, and I think Jeremy can speak to this more, that feeling as part of the company and part of their strategies is helpful. That the student walks in and right away they have an onboarding process, which if any of us have ever taken a job, very helpful, right? How do we log into the computer? The very basics. Where do you get the water? Where do you take breaks? Do you take breaks? And when do you get lunch? So I think the onboarding process is important, but then also at the end, have an exit interview, a short interview to say, what were the things that we did well? What were the things that we can improve maybe for the next intern?
And then as you go through each chapter, checking in with them and making sure that that conversation isn't just like, you know, right at the beginning and right at the end, but that you're always giving feedback, that you're always, you know, not micromanaging the student, because you need to let them kind of fly as well, but giving them ongoing feedback is important.
To build on what Kelly's saying, I think in a workplace where you have a permanent employee, sometimes you can let things evolve and work out themselves. In an internship, typically you have a very time-limited, you have a very specific start and end point. And therefore, sometimes I think it takes some agility with the employer to perhaps address things and give feedback more immediately than you might in another circumstance. And I think the message I've been hearing over the last hour is about trying to be as planful and structured as possible, which I think makes it a better experience for all involved. One of the things we've found too, I'm sure we've all found, is that from an employer perspective, if you have an employee that you would like to maybe get re-engaged in something, mentoring and being involved with an intern sometimes is the spark that a person needs. You know, the best way to learn something is to need to teach it to someone else and to be reinvigorated. And we found from an employer perspective, sometimes that even helps from an internal structuring standpoint.
I think there's been a lot of talk about how to make it an academic experience and learning objectives, job descriptions. But my most positive internship experience has been instances where I was able to feel like I was making a contribution, where what I had just learned for the past couple of years at college, I was able to apply it, and I was able to just really feel like I was a part of the team. And I think that really started with a good orientation program, as Sharon said. On day one, with my full-time internship over the summer, I was brought in with 10 or 15 other people, others who were going to be full-time employees and interns. We went through the process, some company history, and the different logistics, like my day-to-day, where I'm going to be eating lunch at, what time I'm allowed to take my lunch at, where I'm going to be parking, all that kind of stuff. And it just made me feel really comfortable and welcomed into the organization. And I know you might not, smaller firms might not have the same like structure level, but even at the small boutique firms, investment firms that I've worked at, just being sat down and having one of my supervisors or the boss talk to me, let me know what some of their expectations are, and exactly what I'm going to be doing. It made me feel like I was a part of the team and a lot more comfortable in my position.
Yeah, for smaller companies or for a company first-time internship, again, I think it's these little things that we're talking about that seem little but make a big difference. And for supervisors, you know, again, there's a lot of nuances that hopefully you picked up today in terms of what's important to an intern, what's important for their academic career and standing, and what's important for the company. So don't presume that everybody else in your organization knows it, whether it's a 3-person organization or a 30-person organization or a 800-person organization. Don't take things for granted the first flight, and make sure that you're talking to your supervisor about what the expectations are, the subtle differences between an employee versus an intern, and I think that that's a great launching pad to not take things for granted, that you just assume that supervisor is going to know the differences or be sensitive to these differences.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I don't know if you guys caught that, but one of the things I know we do, and we did when I was hosting interns, I worked at Fairchild Semiconductor. We had a large internship program. One of the things that we made sure of is that we spent as much time planning the internship as we did preparing the person who was going to be overseeing the intern. Maybe even Jeremy might be able to speak to it, is what determines a good internship generally isn't just the project, it's the interactions that that person has during their time there. And most of the time there would be being mentored by someone. And if that someone isn't prepared properly, because just because they're your best engineer doesn't mean that they're going to be best at hosting an intern, right? So the people who are going to be hosting your interns need to have projects and the mentoring skill set to make sure that the internship goes well. So we're coming up on time, so what I would love to have each of you do is if you could just give out your one real nugget of wisdom as it relates to employers about hosting an intern, something to do, something that they can walk away with in their mind to say, make sure we do this. So we'll go around the panel and each one of you give this just your real nugget.
I have a quick online question.
Oh, an online question, good.
What are remote companies who don't actually have an office? And so we all work from home across the U.S. and UK, where there are 3 of us that are located in the Wilkes-Barre area, and is not having an office environment to come into every day not beneficial to a prospective intern?
Okay, decentralized. So in other words, the company is decentralized. They don't really have a central office. They all work remotely. How do you effectively host an intern from that situation?
Yes, so from a home office.
From a home office, letting an intern work from a home office. That's a good question.
Well, I've had experiences with students that have had that experience, and I think the best ones were ones that were always engaged with the supervisor and the other employees. So it may be that their days started off with like a Skype conversation or a FaceTime conversation where there was interaction and feedback. I think on our end especially, it's a little more vetting to make sure, you know, the logistics are set up, that it's an actual company or an organization, and that they have success. And so I think having interaction with the student ongoing is extremely important. And you know, the colleges are set up for students to have the opportunities, right? We have labs, we have space for them. There's space here that would be wonderful for them to utilize. And so I think, you know, being able to work through them is important.
Any other questions we might have before we get out there?
Yeah, I have a quick question. I mean, to me, a very, very informative session, and what I've got out of it is that you want to treat the internship program just like you would an onboarding process for any employee coming on board. So you've got a good job description, onboarding process, supervisor mentoring program. But my 2 kind of questions are, one, from an employee point of view, how many of these interns turn into full-time jobs that you know translate to keeping these students in the neighborhood, which I think is very critical. And then from the colleges and university perspective, you know, we talked a little bit about job description from the company's point of view, but I was just wondering if companies have access to job, if you would, skills of the students, so that you could almost go to, I don't know, a database that says I'm looking for a financial analyst, and these are, you know, the ones that fit that criteria, that maybe we could get proactive with the colleges in terms of interviewing some of these for potential jobs. So just kind of curious what your thoughts are with that.
Again, from an employer perspective, pretty much every intern is eligible to apply for a job, and we've hired plenty of them. And maybe it's not their you know, after their sophomore, junior year, but then when they graduate, they come back. You know, we're fortunate that, you know, we've been successful. We're growing. We're adding another 100 jobs in Wilkes-Barre this year, and it looks like we'll add another 100 next year. So we have lots of opportunities. So pretty much all of the interns, including those that intern in our remote offices, are eligible for jobs. So for us, it's been a great way to find great employees. Just to add my nugget of wisdom that you asked for, I had experience in my past career where I taught graduate school as an adjunct professor for about a dozen years. And the reason I did that, for any of those of you that have been an adjunct professor, you don't do it for the money. You do it for the intrinsic benefits. And the benefit to me was that students really keep you fresh and young and challenged and engaged. And that's what I see in our workforce. So again, when we have 30 or 40 students coming in, there's a buzz. And it just lights up our campus and our departments. It's an investment that pays dividends in a variety of ways that it's hard to measure economically. And that was true when I started with the company and we had 60 and 70 employees, and it's true today when we're approaching 800. So it's an investment for your company.
If I could add to that, just, you know, some smaller companies may be saying, I don't have the capacity to bring on my intern in a full-time and hire them. And that's okay, as long as the student is getting a good experience. And then we talk to the student, and I think it's important for the employer to know, you know, that supervisor becomes a great reference for the student. Or they can share their network with the student, and that may open up doors for them with employers that do have opportunities at the time the student is looking. So if you really look at it, someone had mentioned that mentoring aspect, that there is a relationship that's built there, and that supervisor or the organization can really help the student even if they don't have an opening at the time the student is graduating.
So if I can tack on to that as well, it's a good question. Who goes from the internship to the job? And I think Bernie brought up a good point. They are going from the internship, say at Guard in sophomore year, but then they're going to the job based on Carl's reference for them. So are they going to that exact job that they did the internship? Maybe not. But they're going into a place because of that internship. So I'm going to say everyone up here has 100%, because I can almost say from experience that any student who has that ambition and has that attitude can actually move forward, get any internship, but then also get any job. So I'm going with 100%.
And just so you know, too, to be competitive for students now in the marketplace, it's 2 to 3 to 4 experiences. I mean, Jeremy said himself he had 4, and relatable experiences. So it could be 2 to 3 internships, 1 part-time work experience that actually was in the field, but it's all about those transferable skills. And I think, you know, the mentoring and the reference is one piece of it, but it's, you know, these students are hungry, and having these opportunities is what sets them apart.
Can somebody speak to Rico's second question though? Because I think that's something that as an employer is kind of tough, is how do I get to the skill sets that I'm wanting, and what's the right skill sets? How do I get into your organizations? Because Penn State's a pretty big place to be, and who do I call if I want an internship? How do I get into your organizations to get interns? Is something online? Is there somewhere as an employer I can go to find a Jeremy? How do I find him? And, you know, how do I do that?
I can start with Penn State at least. So I am the Eastern Region Employer Engagement Specialist. So I do assist 12 other campuses. So if you're looking for students in any sort of geographical area on the east side of the state, I would probably be your first contact, because I can put you in touch with our career services folks at either Wilkes-Barre, which is Maureen Silbertos right there. She's our career director at the Wilkes-Barre campus. Or I can also engage you with our Scranton campus, John Tobin, all the way down to Philadelphia. So for Penn State, I would be your first contact. And we can talk about what types of majors you're looking for, what type of skill set you're looking for. We also have a university-wide posting system, Nittany Lion Careers. So that would be a great resource. Employers can post on it for free, and you will then have access to not only our current students, but our alumni as well. So about 80,000 students and alumni you would have access to.
Very similar to what Nicole's saying. I suspect we all have a hit through our websites to get, you know, to the right person. We would all be the right person, I think, for our respective institutions. And also that whole alumni base that you were talking about, Nicole. Certainly Penn State's absolutely huge, but we all have that alumni base as well, that if you are looking for, you know, beyond the internship for jobs, for employment, positions, that would be a great way to get in touch with us. And I guess what I heard from us saying, like I was listening to everybody and thought, wow, if you're just starting this might sound a little overwhelming. So I guess I would offer that I'm sure we'd all be willing to work with you on what your need is and try to craft some type of experience. So it might take a little time on your side, but it's not something that any of us can't do with you. We'd be happy to partner with you on that.
And just something to add that could be a resource for you. When I have employers that contact me, I have our list of majors I can send you to places on our website. But if you're just starting to think like maybe I want a financial analyst intern, I always recommend that you look at the Occupational Outlook Handbook on the Bureau of Labor Statistics website and look at what a financial analyst does, and then pull some of those key skills that you would be looking for if you looked downward at a student. MyNextMove.org is also put out through ONET and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We use it all the time with students. It actually helps them identify what skills do I have that make matches. And so those two sites specifically, we use both for the students as well as for the employers. And I think it might help at least pull out some of those technical skills, but also those soft skills that you might be looking for when you're creating your job descriptions.
So I'm going to take the opportunity here with my special powers as moderator to suggest to our host, the intern program, to post some of these websites and other things that we're talking about up here, because I don't know if you're anything like me. I hear it, but then 20 minutes after we leave, I forget what they said. So we hope to get a lot of this information up on the intern website, so you can go up there and have access a lot of this thing. We'll put it in, try to put it in a simple format. We also will have the ability to look at how posting opportunities from each one, from your companies and what students might be available. We're looking at software and things to do that, so that it's easier access for all of you. It's one-stop shopping. You go to the intern portal and do some of that. So we're coming close to our.
I have a quick question. What percentage of interns do you folks see living, let's say, away from home during summer internships, and how is that handled? Is there a way that that's handled? Because obviously that's an additional cost of it. If they're not living at home.
Yeah, I mean, King's, we're primarily like a local institution, but we do draw from the Northeast Corridor like every other institution locally. And I have students that actually, we call them domestic study abroad type internships. So they're going to Washington, D.C. or this summer I had 2 students who, through an alum, went to Akron, Ohio, which, what's in Akron, Ohio? Not much. But they had this experience, and we work very closely with the employer to make sure that living arrangements are sought out and safe as well. And then, the student, kind of has the support of the employer, but also the school in that case. So we do have some of those experiences that do happen. And we work with them. I've had students who've gotten internships in New York City and taken the MART spots 3 days a week into the city. That's a lot, but it was an amazing experience at NBC, ABC, MTV, different financial firms. And it's like that student made that sacrifice because they wanted those opportunities. So I don't think the students would be opposed to those happening. Percentage-wise, I can't give you an exact percentage.
I can say that they also probably add that to the cost of their education. So that's something that they consider, and when I talk to students about doing this, I've also had a student take the MARTS bus 3 days a week. I consider it as, what would you spend on books, or what would you spend on a study abroad experience, and weigh the pros and the cons of that. But I also have to say one other thing, just to talk about the region, because I was going to bring this up. Many of my employers say, I really want someone from the region to do this internship. I would like everyone to keep an open mind, please, because those students have been in the region for 4 years. So they maybe do not want to go back to New Jersey or to New York. Maybe they like the region. I've met many who have. And the other piece of that, maybe they met someone on a personal level that they want to stay connected with. So they remain in this region. So I would like you to keep an open mind and not only look at our people from northeastern Pennsylvania, which we love to employ and keep their educational talents here, but also look at those who have been here for 4 years and consider their educational talents and keeping them here as well. And I think that's a big point for all of the colleges that are represented here.
And to that note, with housing, you know, if the student is from outside of the area but looking to stay and do an internship, say over the summer, there could be opportunity for them to stay on campus. I know we have done that before. Or they may have an apartment that they're leasing for the year, and so they may be here, you know, anyway, or they can work with their network of friends. But I know there are some different opportunities for housing if students are outside of the area but remaining for the summer.
So at this point, maybe 30 seconds each. Your nugget of wisdom, quick, about what you think that anybody in the audience should be walking away with today. Just hosting an internship, best practices.
Communication is the key, from the written job description to communicating with the institution, communicating with the student. If you can maintain that communication, I think you'll have good success.
Students are hungry, and I think there's a lot of opportunity that they can bring to you.
The academics and the paperwork that goes along with internship, they'll come. There's professionals with the university the student comes from to help you with all that. The biggest part is to allow the students to make them feel like they're making a contribution and that they're being utilized and not just making copies, getting coffee, that type of thing.
They were all great. I also want to add for you to enjoy it as well. I was very happy to hear Carl say that his interns light up the building, because it's the reason we do what we do is because the interns and the students we work with bring joy to our position. So I want you to enjoy the same thing.
Great. Think of it as a partnership, I guess, is my idea. Hopefully it's a win-win. You know, a rising tide floats all boats, so hopefully it's a good experience for everyone.
Just what I said earlier about it's a great investment. If you nurture it and make the right investment, it pays great dividends.
I would say that your students are your best marketing tool. So if you're doing an internship and they love the experience, they will share that with their friends, and your recruitment will get that much easier. So the better the experience they have, they will share that with fellow students, and you'll see your recruitment efforts improve year after year.
All right, so with that, we're going to just leave you with my nugget is that remember that internships are an important part of making this region better, both economically, educationally, and otherwise. So please consider doing that. And with that, we're going to thank everyone for joining us. We want to thank our distinguished panel here and if you have questions or you have other things you might want to learn, I know they'll be around for a few minutes after the panel. And also, we want to put the pressure on our intern folks to get our website to make sure that you do it there and everything that you want to get information on. So thanks for all for coming, and we'll see you again sometime.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks.